Interior makeovers are a major source of carbon emissions, and yet they offer a golden opportunity to drive sustainable change. Our next talk, A Practical Framework for Circular Interior Design, explores the unique position interior designers have in the push towards circular interior design. Slide. Nice. Speaking today, we have Brittany McNairy, Senior Technical Coordinator and Senior Associate at Perkins&Will, and Timothy Anscombe-Bell, Well AP Fitwell Ambassador, ASID Director, Sustainable Design Collective. Brittany brings 15 years of experience delivering sustainable workplace, government, and education projects. A recognized sustainability leader, she specializes in healthy interior environments, co-leads the office's embodied carbon and living design initiatives, and serves on ASID's National Committee for Environment, Health, and Wellness. Timothy is a design and sustainability consultant with extensive experience helping architects, designers, developers, and manufacturers create sustainable interior environments. With a background in publishing and sustainability communications, he has led projects across the US and his native UK, and produced 2 sustainability-focused exhibitions at London's Design Museum, which is cool, and more. So let's welcome Timothy and Brittany to the stage.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. As Sophie mentioned, my name is Brittany McNairy. I'm a Senior Technical Coordinator at Perkins&Will in Washington, D.C.
And my name is Tim. I am a consultant and project manager with a focus on healthy and sustainable interiors. A lot of what I do involves working cross-functionally to ensure sustainability ambition gets translated into built outcomes. Brittany and I are both members of ASID's Environment, Health and Wellness Committee, and over the past few months we've been having a series of conversations around how to activate circularity in interior design at scale. So I see a couple of friendly faces in the audience, but just before we get started, we'd love to get a feel for who's in the room. Do we have any interior designers here? Okay, great. Any architects? Any manufacturers or reps? Perfect. Any contractors or GCs? Maybe one in the back. And owners or developers? A couple. Great. Now, keep your hand in the air, or raise your hand, I should say, if you routinely collaborate with at least 2 of the other groups named. Yeah, that gap is what we're here to talk about. Now, one of the things that became clear from through this work and the many conversations we've had with stakeholders was that circularity in interiors doesn't really fail because of technology or because people don't care. It fails because projects and our systems are still fundamentally structured around linear outcomes. Brittany's going to explain a little bit what we mean by that.
Yep. You guys can shift to the next slide. Well, next 2 slides. So I'll touch on a little bit of the differences between the linear and circular economy. You can advance to the next. There you go. Perfect. And so our traditional project process, it consists of a linear material flow, which requires extracting and emitting embodied carbon to create products and materials. And so at the end of the project cycle, traditionally, those products and materials will go directly into a waste stream. Just since our interior projects are those project cycles go from anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20 years, depending on the lease cycles. And so what we're wanting to pivot to, as this diagram is showing a circular material flow, which keeps materials and products in use for longer times, and they can maintain their highest values. And so what we're really wanting to shift towards is circular practices, which enable designers to create interiors that are adaptable as well as reusable. Next slide. And so then why are we focusing on interiors? Within interiors, it plays a crucial role in the broader context of circular architecture. And so the frequency of material turnover that's associated with interior renovations, it results in both carbon and waste impacts over time. And so after just 4 cycles of an interior fit out, the renovation that creates embodied carbon, that impact of fixtures, finishes, and fittings, it can equal the same as the building's embodied carbon that's associated with the core and shell. So this graph here, it's showing that 8% of the initial initial fit out for a building is associated with an interior fit out, and that contributes to embodied carbon. But then over the course of the building's life, which is typically 60 years, we know that based on the renovation cycles of interiors, all of that embodied carbon can equal that of a building's core and shell. And so what this means is it really highlights an urgent need for interiors to focus on circular design to ensure that there is any unnecessary environmental impact. And so really thinking kind of beyond carbon, we're wanting circular design also supports the preservation of craft and manufacturing. So when you think about how products are being used, how can manufacturers remanufacture those and craftspeople? And it also facilitates adaptive reuse. And so really by shifting this mindset, circular design becomes more of a conversation about remanufacturing, about really kind of the quality of the products that we have, as well as the economics and really design culture.
Quick show of hands again, final one. How many people here have worked on a project recently where perfectly usable materials ended up in landfill? I know I have. And that's kind of the point. This really can affect everyone, or it does affect everyone. And as we said before, the challenge isn't usually intent. It's timing, it's coordination, it's procurement structures, it's visibility, visibility and ownership, all the kind of messy project realities. Next slide, please. So as part of the committee's work, we convened a cross-industry barriers analysis workshop last month in partnership with the wonderful team at Green Standards. We brought together senior stakeholders from across the value chain, so contractors, manufacturers, reuse specialists, technology platforms, policy voices, to ask them all a pretty straightforward question. What actually prevents circularity from happening on real projects? Next slide, please. Yeah. Interestingly and kind of encouragingly, as a group, we came away with a similar amount of solutions as there were barriers. And what you see on screen is just a high-level dissemination. But what struck me was that very few of these are what you'd class as technical problems. They're mostly kind of coordination issues.
Yeah, and so in terms of the solutions that you're seeing on the screen, we're really wanting kind of the outcome of that workshop to be solutions that are practical. And so we're really focusing on standardizing language and education throughout the industry, as well as focusing on infrastructure and developing tools and resources that can help drive policy and market incentives.
Yeah, three themes consistently surfaced. They were starting too late, lack of visibility, and misaligned incentives. Now, we only have a short amount of time with you all today, but we're going to touch on each of these and then map against projects from our respective work to hopefully show that meaningful fixes are often very achievable in practice. Next slide, please. All right. The first theme was that circularity often enters projects far too late. By the time reuse conversations typically happen, procurement is already fixed, budgets are locked, demolition has started, and the easiest thing becomes replacing everything. Next slide, please. Now, the project up on screen is a large mixed-use, flexible office and retail space in London. It was designed by Universal Design Studio for British Land, who are a large developer and owner. And what was interesting here was that the conversation started early enough for the millwork itself to be reconsidered. So rather than designing everything as permanently fitted, which is, of course, is how things typically work, all the joinery and case goods were designed around loose fit and modular principles, meaning components could be removed, adapted, repaired, or reused in future, or as tenant needs evolved, rather than being demolished with the lease. This was all planned collaboratively between the owner and developer, the architect, and a fantastic woodworking firm called Benchmark Furniture, who I often collaborate with. Even simple material decisions changed because of that early coordination. For example, using solid timber rather than veneer made future refurbishment easier. Using natural oil finishes rather than lacquer made repair simpler. Even the timber species selection became part of the dialogue, part of the conversation, in this case, using locally sourced hardwoods from sustainably managed forests. Now, none of these decisions are particularly radical in and of themselves. The difference was simply that the right conversations happened early enough. And the bigger point here is that circularity is often won or lost before construction even begins. So it's good to start early.
Yep. Next slide. And so this next example is a project that I worked on recently, completing it. It's for Greenpeace headquarters in Washington, D.C. And it's a great example of how you can embed circular design into your project process early. So we worked with Greenpeace to identify a space that we were able to reuse a lot of the existing built elements that were in the space. And so the image, kind of the left portion of that image is the existing space. On the right side is kind of is new construction. But we worked with a contractor early in the project process. And you can go to the next slide. By having that GC on board early, we were able to do a site walk with them to kind of inventory the existing space and identify different built elements that would be reused, and we could salvage those as a part of the design. And so the millwork that you're seeing, as well as the glass partitions and operable partitions, those were all salvaged elements that were existing in space, in the space. Then by having that GC on board early as well, they had a project that was under demolition locally, and so we were able to work with them through the demolition of that project and identify different building materials like metal studs, ceiling grids that were salvaged from a different site and brought into Greenpeace's space to help facilitate embodied carbon reduction. Next slide. And then finally, about that same project, the wood slat wall that you're seeing here is also an example of how circular design can be scalable. So the wood slats that are here, those were salvaged from the GC's, their own office. They were undergoing a renovation at the time, and they had partial height partitions that had wood end caps at the top. And so we were able to source the wood from their own office and work with a mill worker to have those refinished and cut down to size based on our design. And by working with that GC early, we also had kind of a direct link to a mill worker that was local, and we were able to develop a detail that consisted of mechanical fastening, and so including screws, and so that whole ceiling assembly itself is, it's possible for that to be disassembled in the future if Greenpeace were to vacate that space. So it's an example that you don't necessarily have to take on an entire project, but you can really start small with circularity.
Yeah. What Brittany was talking there about visibility and material tracking is so important because materials only retain value if information about them survives the project lifecycle. Next slide, please. Yeah. The top right here was an office reception with some rather beautiful architectural millwork that I worked on back in 2016. After 6 years of use, Netflix acquired the building and wanted a new look. The desk and fluted millwork could easily have become waste, which is, of course, overwhelmingly what happens in commercial interiors. But here, because the client wanted to avoid sending to landfill, because the material quality was good and the relationship with the original manufacturer still existed, it was able to have a second life. At roughly the same time, we were talking to another architect who was in the process of designing a reception for the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership, part of the University of Cambridge. This created an opportunity for this piece to be remanufactured, for it to be adapted, and then reinstalled within an entirely new project and context. The reason I like this example is because circularity often gets framed as futuristic or highly technical. But often it's simply about creating relationships, retaining information and material value for long enough for reuse to become the preferred solution. The challenge is that most interiors become anonymous the moment that they get installed. Next slide, please. The third theme that surfaced repeatedly throughout the workshop was misaligned incentives. Now, designers, procurement teams, contractors, landlords, tenants, everyone is often optimizing for slightly different things. And what's interesting is that disposal is often not the cheapest solution. It's just the least coordinated solution, right? I think it's important to say, as Brittany noted earlier, that circularity doesn't have to begin with huge business model or infrastructure changes. It can start with one table, one pilot, one client willing to try something just a little bit different. The top right was a much-loved communal table at the Ace Hotel, the kind of table where people gather all day with kind of coffee and laptops. When the hotel changed hands, the new client and designer wanted a lighter, kind of more biophilic interior scheme. Because the table had been properly constructed and made from decent materials, in this case solid ash, it could return to the manufacturer, have its black stain sanded back, have a new profile and end detail added, and be brought back into use. And importantly, it cost a fraction of replacing it with an entirely new piece. And that's the thing we often miss in these conversations, right? Reuse can feel beautiful, it can feel premium, and it can be very functional, all while saving a ton of money. Once clients and teams see that in practice, conversations change pretty quickly.
Next slide. So we wanted to leave you with a few takeaways for things that you can take on in your practice right now. And so these are outcomes that are linked to the solutions that we looked at earlier, just as a part of that barriers analysis workshop that we completed. And so really, one of those things is just being sure that you're starting those conversations early about reuse and making sure that all project partners are aligned, as well as thinking about those existing spaces. So instead of going in and white boxing a space, how can we use what's already there as an existing material bank? And so that'll really help with reuse as you're starting your projects early. Also, being very clear about the design intent. So indicating on drawings, having notes that call attention to, for the subcontractors, for contractors. So I think one of the through lines with all of this, it's aligning project partners, ensuring that everyone knows about circularity and the circular design intent that you have for the project process. As well as starting small. You don't necessarily have to take on an entire project. It could be something like that example that Tim shared. It could be a table or a desk. But really start in a way that you'll be able to kind of understand a process and utilize that moving forward, as well as reaching out to manufacturers. Designers have a huge opportunity to drive the market and drive change. So be sure that you're engaging with manufacturers and asking them questions about their take-back programs, if they have them, and how you can be a part of that process. Since the designers and architects, we're kind of the one link throughout all of the project that touches all the different project partners. So we have an ability to be engaged at all levels of the process to ensure some of these circular design outcomes.
Yeah, none of these are huge individually, but collectively they can really start to change the curve and change how projects operate. Circularity doesn't need to begin perfectly, after all. It just needs to begin earlier and more intentionally. I know we're conscious of time, but if we could just change the slide.
There you go.
Another thing we realized through this work is that the industry still lacks shared language and practical implementation tools. So through ASID, we're currently developing a circularity glossary, our first circular design guide and practice framework for later this year, alongside a bunch of interesting tools for 2027. The goal here is to help make these conversations easier to have across project teams.
Yep. And while we're here at NeoCon, it's a great opportunity for you to find someone that's outside of your direct work. So ensure that you're engaging with manufacturers and different developers or different project stakeholders. And so the ask is that you engage with one of them, meet them, and find out how together you can work together to achieve circular design on your projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the next circular project probably isn't going to come from one perfect product. It's going to come from better collaboration between the people already in this room. Thanks very much.